Do this to an empath, and they will never come back. Not because they stopped loving you, not because they stopped caring, but because something inside them finally died. And if you've ever been the person who stayed too long, forgave too much, explained yourself until your voice shook, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Empaths don't leave at the first red flag. That's the tragedy. They stay after the disrespect, after the silence, after the manipulation, after being made to feel crazy for reacting to pain they didn't create. They stay because they can feel the wound inside other people, because they know what broken looks like, because somewhere in their past, nobody stayed for them either, and toxic people sense that instantly. They see the patience, the softness, the emotional endurance, and they mistake it for weakness. But there is one moment, one specific moment, when the empath finally changes forever. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, there's no screen, Ming, no revenge, no warning, just silence. Cold, terrifying silence. Because the person who kept choosing you finally chooses themselves. And once that happens, you will never get the same version of them again. There's something people never understand about empaths. Empaths can survive almost anything except emotional betrayal, not pain, not distance, not struggle. Betrayal. Because empaths don't connect casually. When they love you, they open rooms inside themselves nobody else has access to. Rooms built from childhood wounds, hidden fears, private dreams, insecurities they never say out loud. And when someone mishandles that, when someone uses their vulnerability against them, it doesn't just hurt, it rewires them. The first thing that destroys an empath is inconsistency mixed with emotional manipulation. That combination is lethal, because empaths live through emotional patterns. They notice energy shifts before words. They hear the tension behind "I'm fine," T. Hey, feel rejection before it's spoken. So when someone alternates between affection and withdrawal, love and silence, closeness and distance, the empath begins living in emotional survival mode. And this is where the damage becomes invisible. They start questioning themselves every day. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe if I explain it differently, they'll finally understand me. So they over-explain, over-give, over-forgive. Not because they're weak, because they genuinely believe connection can heal confusion. But toxic people thrive in confusion, especially avoidant people who only know intimacy when it's on their terms. One day they pull you close, the next day they disappear emotionally and make you feel needy for noticing. That emotional whiplash destroys empaths slowly, not all at once, slowly, like water dripping on stone. And nobody sees it happening because empaths suffer quietly. They still show up, still smile, still check on everybody else. Meanwhile, internally, they are collapsing. I knew an empath once who loved someone so deeply that she memorized the emotional temperature of their silence. Think about that. She could tell what mood they were in by the way they typed "okay." That's how deeply empaths study the people they love. But the problem is, the deeper the empath loves you, the more pain they're willing to tolerate before leaving. And toxic people become addicted to that tolerance. They push boundaries, cross lines, disappear, return. Apologize just enough to keep access to the empath's heart. And every time the empath forgives them, a piece of the empath disappears. Until eventually, the empath wakes up one day emotionally exhausted beyond repair. And this part matters. When an empath reaches emotional exhaustion, they do not argue anymore. They detach, quietly, permanently. That's the moment people mistake for coldness. But it's not coldness. It's grief. It's the final L stage of emotional burnout. Because the empath realizes something devastating. I kept trying to save someone who was comfortable watching me drown. And once that realization hits, the emotional bond snaps. Not loudly, silently. That's why toxic people panic when an empath finally stops reacting. No long paragraphs, no emotional conversations, no begging for clarity, just absence. Because the empath finally understands something powerful. Closure was never coming from the other person. And the second an empath stops seeking closure from the person who hurt them, they become impossible to manipulate. That is the day the empath becomes dangerous. Not dangerous because they want revenge. Dangerous because they no longer need validation from people who wounded them. And there is nothing more powerful than an empath who finally sees clearly. Because now, They stop explaining their pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. They stop shrinking themselves to fit in. Eyed emotionally unavailable people. They stop translating loyalty into self-sacrifice. And suddenly, the person everyone thought would stay forever walks away without looking back. The second thing that makes an empath disappear forever is being emotionally abandoned during their darkest moment. This one cuts deeper than most people realize. Because empaths are the people everybody runs to when life falls apart. They are the late-night phone calls, the emotional caretakers, the human safe places. They sit with people through breakdowns, depression, trauma, failures, panic attacks. And they do it without keeping score. That's the part nobody talks about. Empaths give emotional labor like oxygen, naturally, constantly, quietly. But eventually, there comes a moment when the empath needs someone too. And this is where the heartbreak happens. Because many empaths discover the painful truth that the people they carried emotionally cannot carry them back. The empath finally breaks down, and suddenly everybody disappears. The messages become shorter. The energy changes. People become uncomfortable with the empath's pain because they only liked the empath when they were useful. That realization destroys something sacred inside an empath. To feel emotionally abandoned when you spent your whole life being emotionally available for others changes you forever. I remember hearing a man say once, "The worst pain isn't being unloved. It's realizing you were only loved for what you provided emotionally." That's the empath's deepest wound. Conditional love. Being valued for healing others while bleeding privately. And many empaths learned this pattern in childhood. They became emotionally hyper-aware because they grew up around unstable energy. They learned to read moods for survival, learned to comfort others before understanding themselves. So as adults, they attract emotionally unavailable people like magnets, because chaos feels familiar. And when the empath finally reaches their breaking point, they don't explode outward. They implode inward. They isolate, disappear, go emotionally numb. Not because they stopped feeling, because they felt too much for too long with nobody protecting them. And the terrifying thing about empath burnout is this. By the time they tell you they're hurt, they've usually been suffering in silence for months, maybe years, because empaths don't want to burden people, even while carrying burdens nobody ever noticed they had. That's why when an empath finally says, "I can't do this anymore, you should understand," that sentence was built on 1,000 unspoken disappointments, 1,000 moments where they chose understanding over honesty, patience over boundaries, loyalty over self-respect, until eventually their nervous system simply cannot survive the relationship anymore. And this is what people misunderstand. Empaths don't leave because they stopped loving you. They leave because AIY started destroying them. There's a difference. A massive difference. Some empaths still love the people they walk away from. But they finally realize love without emotional safety becomes self-destruction. And once an empath learns that lesson deeply, they never return to the same dynamic again. Because pain changes them. Not into monsters, into people with boundaries, into people who finally understand that protecting their peace is not selfish. It's survival. And the most heartbreaking part? Most toxic people never realize what they lost until the empath is emotionally gone. Because empaths make people feel seen in ways the world rarely does. They listen differently, love differently, notice details nobody else notices. And once that energy disappears, the silence becomes unbearable. That's when the toxic person comes back. The late messages, the vague apologies, the sudden nostalgia. But by then, the empath has already mourned the relationship while still inside it. That's why they sound calm when they leave. They already cried every tear in private. The version of them that begged for understanding is already gone. And if you're the empath listening to this right now, the one who stayed too long, the one who kept trying to heal people who kept hurting you, the one exhausted from carrying emotional weight nobody thanked you for, hear this carefully. Your softness was never the problem. Your empathy was never weakness. The problem was giving unconditional love to people committed to conditional behavior. You were not born to abandon yourself just to keep other people comfortable. You were not created to bleed endlessly just because you know how to survive pain. And one day, you will meet people who do not confuse your kindness with permission to mistreat you. People who communicate clearly, love consistently. Protect your heart the way you protected theirs. But first, You must stop reopening doors that nearly destroyed you, because healing requires distance from what broke you. And sometimes the most powerful thing an empath can say is nothing at all. Just goodbye. If this video felt personal, if it sounded like someone finally said the thing you've been carrying silently for years, then stay connected. There are more conversations here for people who feel deeply in a world that often punishes depth. Subscribe quietly if this spoke to you. And until next time, protect your peace. Because people who can feel everything deserve protection too.